There was a truth I kept hidden, one I wished would stay buried forever. But sometimes the truth has to come out, not as an excuse but as a lesson. A wake-up call for anyone standing on the edge of a life-changing mistake. This isn't the story of a hero. It's the story of a man who stumbled, who thought he was strong enough to resist temptation but learned the hard way about honesty, self-control, and the cost of one poor decision. My name is Jake. I'm 28 years old and grew up in a small town in Kentucky. My family didn't have much. My parents worked long hours doing whatever they could to provide. Watching them struggle shaped me as I got older. I learned early on that life isn't always fair, but it's my job to deal with it. Life didn't give me an easy start. Money was tight and finishing school wasn't an option. I dropped out to help my parents, knowing it meant my life would be full of hard work and limited choices. But I didn't complain. I knew my life was my responsibility. After leaving school, I got a job at a small auto repair shop in town. At first, I was just an extra pair of hands, cleaning tools, organizing supplies, and assisting the mechanic. Over time, though, I learned how to fix engines, change oil, and replace tires. The work was tough, but it gave me purpose. Slowly, I earned the trust of customers and found pride in my progress. That shop became more than a job, it became the foundation of my life. In 2013, everything changed. I met Emma, a smart, beautiful, and confident woman. She was everything I admired. Emma, a year younger than me, worked as a lawyer. She carried herself with grace and certainty. We met through a mutual friend, and from the moment I saw her, I was hooked. What started as friendship grew into something more. Emma had this way of understanding me, and I admired how she saw the world. Even though we came from different worlds, she grew up wealthy and I didn't, it didn't matter. We embraced those differences and built a connection based on trust and respect. She stood by me through thick and thin, supporting me not just as my partner but as my teammate. Her unwavering belief in me made me realize I wanted to spend my life with her. When Emma and I decided to get married, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Her parents were successful business owners who had high standards for their daughter. They didn't think I was good enough for her and made it clear they expected Emma to marry someone who matched their lifestyle. At first, I felt out of place and insecure, but Emma stood by me. She fought for us and reminded me that our love was what mattered. Her support gave me the strength to keep going. After our wedding, we couldn't afford our own home, so we moved in with her parents. Living with her family wasn't easy. Their house was big and grand, nothing like what I'd grown up in. I felt like I didn't belong. But Emma reassured me, saying love and respect would help us get through anything. The early days of our marriage were happy. Emma made me feel valued and we spent time planning our future. For a while, it felt like I was finally finding my place in her world. But then things started to change. Emma's career as a lawyer demanded more of her time. She was often away on business trips, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a week or more. The house grew quieter with each trip. Her parents were busy with their own lives, leaving me alone in a house that felt less like a home. The only person around was Rachel, Emma's younger sister. Rachel was full of energy, always laughing and talking about something. At first, I thought of her as just my sister-in-law, someone to chat with when the house felt too quiet. But as Emma's absences grew longer, Rachel's presence became harder to ignore. What started as light conversations turned into longer talks. She'd ask questions about me and Emma, curious questions that seemed innocent at first, but over time they felt like something more. I loved Emma, but as her trips increased, so did my loneliness. I'd sit in the living room staring at the walls, wondering where I fit into her world. In those moments, Rachel became a constant presence, a distraction from the emptiness I felt. She began wearing outfits that were impossible not to notice. Tight tank tops, short shorts, and dresses that left little to the imagination. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that she was just comfortable in her own home. But the way she looked at me, the way her eyes lingered, told me otherwise. I tried to push away the thoughts, to remind myself that she was Emma's sister, nothing more. But the growing attraction frightened me. I was standing on dangerous ground, balancing between loyalty and temptation. Each passing day brought me closer to a line I knew I couldn't cross. There was a truth I kept hidden. In those quiet moments, I realized how fragile everything was. My love for Emma, my sense of self, even my future, all of it felt like it was hanging by a thread. And yet, I couldn't stop the storm building inside me. Lily started showing up more often, and something about her behavior shifted. She began wearing clothes that were hard to ignore, tight tops, short skirts, and nightgowns that left very little to the imagination. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just how she dressed, casual and carefree. But as it happened over and over, it became clear she was doing it on purpose. I tried not to think about it, I reminded myself who I was, who Lily was, and, most importantly, the promises I made to Emma. But the loneliness and isolation in that big empty house pressed down on me, making it harder to ignore the tension building between us. I could feel myself inching closer to a dangerous line, one I couldn't afford to cross. When I first moved into the house, of course, I noticed Lily. She was young, attractive, and full of life. But to me, she was just Emma's little sister, a part of the family. Sure, I was aware that my appearance, tall, fit, a guy used to working with his hands, might catch her eye, but I never let the thought go further. For months, everything stayed normal. I worked long hours at the auto shop, came home late, and barely spoke to Lily beyond a polite hello or good night. But as Emma's trips became more frequent, the dynamic started to change. Lily stopped keeping her distance. Her presence felt unavoidable and her behavior became bolder. When we were alone, she'd wear outfits so revealing it was impossible not to notice. Tank tops that barely hung on, short shorts, or thin nightgowns that didn't cover much at all. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. A coincidence, maybe just her way of being comfortable at home. But the way she walked past me, how her eyes lingered as if daring me to look back, told a different story. It wasn't a coincidence. It was deliberate. Her presence became harder to ignore, and no matter how much I tried to push the thoughts away, they crept back in. Deep down, I knew I loved Emma. But in those quiet, lonely moments, I caught myself noticing Lily, her movements, her voice, her smile. The pull I felt terrified me. Inside, I was fighting a battle. On one side was my loyalty to Emma, the woman I had promised to love and cherish. On the other was a growing temptation, pulling me closer with every passing day. I knew I was standing on the edge of something that could destroy everything. Then came the night that changed everything. It was an ordinary evening in July. Emma was away again for work, and by then I was used to being alone. Her parents were out and the house was eerily quiet. It was just me and Lily. We had dinner together, a simple meal with small talk to fill the silence. She asked about my day at work, cracked a few jokes, and laughed. On the surface it seemed like nothing. But underneath, there was a tension I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. After dinner, I retreated to the bathroom for a shower, hoping the hot water would clear my mind and ease the unease growing inside me. I closed the door, thinking I'd left everything else on the other side. But in my exhaustion, I forgot something important. I didn't lock the door. I stripped down, stepped into the shower, and let the water wash over me. My mind wandered, preoccupied with the emptiness that had taken hold over the past weeks. Suddenly, the door creaked open. I froze. My heart pounded as I looked up to see Lily standing there. She was completely naked, her skin glowing under the bathroom light. Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with a boldness that left me paralyzed. What are you doing?" I stammered, my voice shaky. My mind screamed at me to do something, to take control, to stop this. But my body refused to move. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence overwhelming in the small, steamy room. "Do you want to know what I taste like?" she whispered, her voice low and inviting. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing for an escape. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. "Get out. You can't do this," I managed to say, but my words sounded weak, like they didn't even convince me. She didn't stop. She moved closer, closing the space between us. The light illuminated every detail, making it impossible to look away. My willpower crumbled. I let myself get pulled into the storm of weakness and desire. When the door clicked shut behind her, sealing us in, I knew my fate was sealed. I crossed the line I had sworn never to approach. Afterward, the weight of what I'd done crashed over me like a tidal wave. I stood there, numb, unable to comprehend the magnitude of my actions. Lily looked at me with a satisfied smile, like she'd won some game I didn't even realize I was playing. But to me it wasn't a game. It was betrayal. I had betrayed Emma, my wife, the woman who loved me and trusted me completely. I had betrayed myself and the values I thought I stood for. Guilt and regret consumed me, but nothing could undo what had just happened. Without meeting Lily's eyes, I left the bathroom quietly. The silence in the house felt unbearable as I walked down the hallway back to my room. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the shame that clung to me like a shadow. I dressed and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of what I'd done. But no matter how I tried to justify it, the guilt refused to let me go. When Emma returned home, I forced myself to act normal. We ate dinner with her parents, talking about our days as if nothing had happened. On the outside, everything seemed fine. But inside, I was falling apart. Lily, on the other hand, acted completely unfazed. She laughed, joked, and acted like nothing had changed. But every so often, she'd glance at me, quick, subtle looks that felt like quiet reminders of what had happened. Each one made my stomach churn. At night, as I lay next to Emma, the memory replayed in my mind like a broken record. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't escape the regret that clawed at me. Here's a rewritten version with simpler language and a straightforward tone while preserving the message. I wanted to tell Emma everything to get the weight off my chest and admit the truth. But I couldn't. The fear of losing her and destroying everything we had built kept me silent. Lily didn't say anything either. We both kept up the act, but the silence between us was unbearable. Days turned into weeks, and the guilt felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. I felt like I was living a lie. To everyone else, I was a loyal husband and a dependable son-in-law. But inside I was a traitor. I hated myself and couldn't forgive what I had done. Every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. The shame had eaten away at who I used to be, leaving me hollow. I didn't know how much longer I could carry this weight. But one thing was certain, things would never be the same again. To anyone reading this, especially those facing temptation, let my story be a warning. Temptation doesn't come when you're ready. It sneaks up on you when you're vulnerable, lonely, or struggling. It pulls you into a moment of weakness, a moment that can change your life forever. In those quiet moments, lapse in judgment can ruin the things you hold closest to your heart, your family, your happiness, and your self-respect. I know this because I've lived it. I've carried the crushing guilt and regret. And let me tell you, it doesn't go away. Self-control isn't just about protecting others. It's about protecting yourself. A single mistake can take everything you've worked for and replace it with shame and regret. That fleeting moment of pleasure isn't worth the price. What truly defines a person is their ability to see the line between right and wrong and to stop themselves before crossing it. Never give up your happiness, your family, or your self-respect for something temporary. Once you cross that line, you can't undo it. If I could go back, I'd make a different choice. I'd fight harder to resist. I'd find the strength to stay true to myself and to Emma. But I can't change the past. I have to live with the pain of what I did every single day. Don't make the same mistake. Learn from me. When temptation comes, and it will, take a moment to step back. Think about what really matters. Remember that self-control is your strongest weapon. Protect what's important to you because once it's gone, you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you could get it back.